The impact threw me against the harness so hard that I heard my own ribs crack before I heard the alarm. Smoke filled the cabin. Metal screamed around me as the shuttle tore through the canopy of silver trees and skidded across broken ground. When it finally stopped, the silence was worse than the noise had been. I unbuckled myself with shaking hands and coughed out the smoke burning my lungs. My name is Ethan Marsh, and 30 seconds earlier I had been the only human passenger on a supply run to a moon that no human was ever supposed to land on. Now I was alone, bleeding, and stranded in the territory of a species that hated my kind before I was even born. I dragged myself out of the wreck and collapsed onto the ground. Above me, the sky was a deep violet, and the trees around me shimmered like glass. I had read about the Veilthier in mission briefings. Insectoid, hierarchical, ruled by a single queen mother who saw humans as a threat too dangerous to be allowed near her people. I did not expect to survive the next hour. Then I heard footsteps, not heavy, not aggressive, light and quick, like something trying not to be noticed. I turned my head and saw them, 3 young Veilthier, smaller than the soldiers described in our files, with pale gold markings across their arms. Their eyes were wide, not with hunger, but with something closer to fear and wonder at the same time. One of them said something rapid in their clicking language. I didn't understand a word of it, but I understood the way she knelt beside me, hesitated, and then pressed her hand gently against the wound on my side. I should have been afraid. Instead, I felt something strange settle in my chest. Relief. "You should run," I whispered, my voice cracking. "If your mother finds you here, with me, I don't know what she'll do to you." They didn't run. The oldest of them, who I would later learn was named Sarah, looked at her sisters, then back at me, and shook her head slowly, the way someone does when they've already made a decision they know is dangerous. They carried me, all 3 of them together, through the glass trees to a hollow beneath a rock formation, hidden from the paths their people usually walked. It took them most of the night. My body screamed in pain with every movement, but I never once heard them complain. By the time the sun rose, weak and violet through the canopy, I was lying on a bed of soft moss, my wounds wrapped with strips of fabric they had torn from their own robes. I learned their names slowly, through gestures and repetition. Sarah, the oldest, careful and quiet. Nyla, the middle daughter, who was curious about everything, touching my hands, my hair, my face, as if she were trying to memorize something forbidden. And the youngest, Ori, who barely spoke, but who stayed closest to me at night, as if she were afraid I would disappear if she looked away. None of them had ever spoken to a human before. Their entire lives had been built around one rule, drilled into them since birth. Humans are dangerous. Humans must never be trusted. Humans will corrupt anything they touch. And yet here they were, breaking that rule without hesitation, the moment they saw someone who needed help. I didn't know it yet, but word of my crash had already reached the Queen Mother. Her name was spoken only in the hushed language of authority, never casually. Queen Vesa ruled from a spire of black stone at the center of the hive, and she had ruled through fear of exactly this scenario. Not fear that a human would harm her daughters with weapons, but fear of something she considered far worse. The fear that a human would show them kindness, and that kindness would make them question everything they had been taught to believe. When her scouts reported that 3 of her daughters were missing, and that a human had survived the crash, her fear became certainty. She ordered every soldier in the hive to search the outer paths. She ordered that I be found, and dealt with the moment I was located, and she ordered her daughters be brought before her immediately, untouched by whatever influence I might have already planted in them. I didn't know any of this yet. I only knew that Sarah kept glancing toward the tree line with worry in her eyes, and that Nyla had started teaching me words in their language, faster than before, as if she were racing against something. "Why are you helping me?" I asked her, once I had learned enough words to ask. Nyla thought for a long moment before answering. "Because you looked at us like we were people, not weapons, not heirs, people." I didn't have an answer for that. I just nodded, and felt something in my chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with my injuries. Over the following days, hidden in that hollow beneath the rock, I told them stories, not the stories our history books tell about wars and conquest, but the ones that rarely make it into official records. Stories about a woman who ran into a burning building to save someone she barely knew. A man who gave up everything he owned to protect a stranger's child. Neighbors who stood outside each other's homes during disasters, refusing to leave, simply because someone they cared about was inside. Ori listened to every story with her knees pulled to her chest, her golden eyes wide in the dim light. "Humans do this," she asked, "even when it costs them everything?" "Sometimes, especially then," I said. Sarah was quieter than her sisters, but I noticed the way she watched me when I flinched from pain, The way she adjusted my bandages without being asked. The way her hesitation from that first night had slowly disappeared. She wasn't just protecting me anymore. She had chosen to. On the fourth day, the soldiers found us. I heard them before I saw them. The heavy rhythm of many feet moving through the glass trees, closing in from every direction. Sarah stood immediately, placing herself between me and the entrance of the hollow. Nyla grabbed a broken branch, holding it despite trembling hands. Ori pressed herself against my side, refusing to move even when I told her to run. "Please," I said. "Go. I don't want any of you in trouble because of me." "No," Sarah said, and for the first time her voice didn't shake. The soldiers parted, and Queen Vesa herself stepped into the clearing. She was taller than her daughters, her presence heavy enough to make the air feel thinner. Her eyes, dark as polished stone, moved from me to her daughters and back again, searching for the damage she was certain she would find. Signs of manipulation, signs of corruption, signs that the human had twisted her daughters into something unrecognizable. Instead, she found them standing in front of me, shielding me with their own bodies. "Step aside," Queen Vesa said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "This creature has confused your minds. Step aside, and this will end quickly." Sarah didn't move. "He hasn't confused anything," she said. "He barely saved himself, and still chose to comfort us with his words instead of asking us to help him. He told us stories," Nyla added, her voice steadier now, "about humans who stayed, even when staying was risky. He never once asked us to stay for him. We chose it." Queen Vesa's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I thought I saw something crack behind that composed expression. Not anger, something closer to disbelief. "You would defy me," she said quietly, "for a creature you have known for 4 days?" "We would defy anyone," Ori said, stepping forward despite her small size, "who tried to take away someone who showed us kindness without asking for anything in return." The clearing fell silent. Even the soldiers seemed uncertain, glancing at each other as if none of them had expected this outcome either. I watched Queen Vesa's expression shift, slowly, from fury to something far more complicated. She had spent her entire reign preparing for the moment a human would harm her people, would turn her daughters against her, would prove every warning true. Instead, she was watching 3 of her own daughters, raised in strict isolation, choose loyalty over obedience for the very first time in their lives. Not because I had commanded it, not because I had persuaded them, but because somewhere in those 4 days, they had learned what it meant to care about someone, simply because they deserved to be cared for. "Explain this to me," Queen Vesa said, and her voice had lost its edge of command. It sounded, for the first time, almost uncertain. I pushed myself up from the moss, ignoring the ache in my side, and met her eyes directly, refusing to look away even though everything in me wanted to. "I never asked them to defy you," I said. "I never asked them to stay. I told them stories about people who choose loyalty, even when it costs them something. Your daughters made their own choice. That's not corruption. That's what happens when someone is given the chance to care about another person without being told how to feel about it." Queen Vesa studied me for a long time, her expression unreadable. Then she turned to her daughters, examining each of them in turn, as if seeing them clearly for the first time in their lives. "You could have reported him," she said to Sarah. "You could have followed the law you were raised with." "I could have," Sarah answered, "but he was afraid, and hurt, and alone, and none of us could walk away from that, no matter what we were taught." Queen Vesa was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, she lowered her hand, and the soldiers behind her stepped back. "I feared," she said quietly, "that a human would teach my daughters to abandon everything they knew. Instead, you taught them to hold on to something I never gave them a reason to feel." She looked at me then, and I saw something shift behind her dark eyes. Not forgiveness, not yet, but curiosity. The same curiosity her daughters had shown me on that first night, when they chose to help a stranger instead of following the rules they had been raised with. "You will not be harmed," she said finally. "Not because I trust you, but because my daughters have shown me something I did not expect to see, and I find that I want to understand it before I decide anything else." In the days that followed, I was allowed to stay under careful watch while my injuries healed. Sarah, Nyla, and Ori visited me often, no longer hiding, no longer whispering in fear of being caught. Queen Vesa herself came to speak with me more than once, asking questions about human history, human loyalty, and the strange, stubborn love humans carried for people they chose to protect. She never fully let go of her guard. I didn't expect her to, but something had shifted in the way she looked at her daughters, and in the way she looked at me. When the rescue ship finally arrived to take me home, Sarah walked with me to the edge of the clearing where it had landed. She didn't say goodbye the way I expected. Instead, she placed her hand over her chest, in a gesture she had learned from watching me do the same to comfort myself during the pain of those first few days. "You said humans protect the people they choose," she said. "We chose you first." I looked back at the hive as the ship lifted into the violet sky, and I thought about everything Queen Vesa had feared. She had spent years preparing for the moment humanity would ruin her daughters, would turn them into something dangerous and unrecognizable. She never once imagined that the thing she feared would look like loyalty, like courage, like 3 young lives choosing to stand between a stranger and everything they had ever known, simply because kindness had been shown to them first. She feared the worst. What she found instead was something her own world had never given her daughters a chance to feel, until a stranger from another world showed them what it meant to be chosen, and to choose in return.